Hello, and welcome back to the Collapse Life podcast. I'm Zara Sethna, and today we're going to do things just a little bit differently. Since starting this podcast and the accompanying blog at collapselife.substack.com, several people have asked about the backstory. Who am I? What led me to start this channel? What's my background? And why should anyone listen? So today, I want to try to address some of those questions. I recently had the distinct honor of being interviewed by the former Wall Street whiz kid Peter Grandich, someone who's been on Collapse Life before as a guest and someone who I greatly admire. He asked me about what led me to start Collapse Life, and I had the opportunity to share my story with him. We'll play that video for you in a minute. In that chat, which we recorded on Zoom just a few weeks ago, you may notice I'm identified as FLCCC Zara. That's because up until very recently, I was the Senior Director of Communications for the FLCCC Alliance, a medical organization started by Doctors Paul Marik and Pierre Corey to fight for things like informed consent and repurposed drugs during the craziness of the pandemic. The organization they founded, FLCCC, is in the midst of a transition right now, and as of today, I am no longer affiliated with it. What that means is I'm free to fully devote my time and attention to building this channel and growing the community around Collapse Life. It's clear the subjects we talk about here are a threat to some very powerful forces, and we are being shadow banned. At times, we're outright censored, but we're most definitely being suppressed and hidden from view. So before we go on, I want to ask you to take a second to hit the like button and the subscribe button. And not just on this video, but take a look at the content the team and I have been producing over the past 8 months, and give us a like on those too. And if you want, please share the videos and our articles on social media with your friends and family, and as far and wide as you're comfortable with. Let's push back on the continued banning of truth-seeking alternative voices. At this point, it's incredibly cliche to say COVID was a wake-up call, but it's true. In my case, it was the final straw, a push that made me say, enough is enough. All I want from here on out is to continue to be true to what I believe in, to pursue the truth, whatever that might be, in order to add something positive to the world. If you're on a similar path, I am so glad you're here, and I can't wait to see what we discover together. Your support means the world to me and the entire Collapse Life team. So without further ado, here's my conversation with a great man, a great investor, and someone fully grounded in reality and truth, Peter Grandich.
Well, hello, everyone. This is Peter Grandich. I always remind you this is not to be considered investment advice. Always speak to a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decision and to read all our disclosures. Well, after 40-something years, I've probably done somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 interviews, and 98 or 99% of them I can't remember. One, of course, I remember where I got my moniker, the Wall Street whiz kid from Good Morning America. But in recent times, I was interviewed twice by our next guest, and they are so informative and well done that they're on the front page of my homepage of my website. And I've asked that person who interviewed me, would you give me the courtesy of trying to return the favor so I can learn more and tell our audience about you? And here she is. And of course, I'm speaking to Zara Zetter. Run Collapse Life. It's a real interesting story because it's a real life story how you got there, but it starts a long time ago pretty well. And it starts, and I'm going to let you take it from there, basically being involved in journalism and working at the United Nations. So if you have to go before that, go before it, but let's start there and work our way forward. And by the way, welcome.
Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real honor. And to be up there with Good Morning America, that's both a treat and a little, maybe a question mark. But so I started out in journalism, and I always wanted to be behind the scenes. I wanted to tell stories and talk to interesting people, but I was never all that comfortable being in front of the camera. But we can talk about that. But this is where I find myself now, and it's been a journey. As you said, I worked in journalism, but also in international development, working in communications. And in the course of my career, I've made a quite a switch, and it's been a journey to kind of learn what what was going on the inside, certainly, especially with the work in the United Nations. When I joined that organization, I started out just as working as a consultant, and that was just a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed ideologue, kind of thinking, "Oh, great! This is a way that I can put my skills to use in communications and actually help kind of make the world a better place." And I got a chance to go and live in other countries and do that work. And on the ground, there were some things that we were doing that were directly helping people, certainly, giving them healthcare and education and things like that. But as I progressed in my career doing that, and working more kind of at the higher level in headquarters, I started to realize very much that just the politics of it all, as you know from working in finance, it's a very different thing than what you think from the outside. And I started to realize that in journalism as well. I was working in big news organizations like the New York Times, or in Canada at the CBC, and realizing that the stories that should be told are not always told, or they're not always told in the right way or in the most objective way. Certain stories just get left on the table, self-censored. We're not going to touch that, or we don't think it should be told in that way. And so all of that, it's very kind of top level, but all of that is what led to a slow awakening, which really accelerated during COVID. I would say that I started to realize that in order to do things, working in journalism or telling stories that I had hoped to do when I started out in this career, I'm going to have to do it myself. I'm not going to be able to work in somebody else's organization or take the suggestions of someone else in a larger organization. I would just have to go out and do it myself. So that's where we've come to since last fall. My husband and I started Collapse Life as a way to help ourselves understand the very interesting moment that we live in right now, but also help an audience kind of go on that journey with us. And so we get to talk to people like you and hear from you and your experience, what has brought us here, what is happening, and how can we prepare for it? Really, that's the point of Collapse Life. Is it's not about fear mongering or just focusing on the problems, but it's really about kind of trying to share solutions, or at least figure those out together with our guests and with our audience. What can we do to kind of get through this so that we don't fall under the weight of it all?
So after you worked at the United Nations, if I remember your bio, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually moved to Canada, I believe, correct?
Yes.
But you didn't exactly have the greatest of times there.
Yeah, well, it was good and it was not. Yeah. Well, so we were living in New York City during the last great financial crisis, and my husband was definitely way ahead of me in terms of understanding what was happening and seeing the train coming down the tracks and following people like you and reading Zero Hedge. And he was definitely seeing what was happening well ahead. And so living in New York City, we started to realize how vulnerable we could be if something were to happen. And, living in an apartment and not being able to have any of the sort of self-sufficiency that you and I have talked about if a crisis were to happen. So we decided that we wanted to get out of the city, and we both have Canadian citizenship. So we were looking for something out in the country where we could create a little homestead and be self-sufficient and just kind of also just be out in nature and reset. When we lived in New York, we lived the life that people kind of would dream about. We owned our own apartment. We both had good jobs. We made good money. We could travel if we wanted to. We could go out to eat if we wanted to, but we were fundamentally unhappy with the life that we had in spite of all of that. And this really, I think, goes to what you always talk about, Peter. Life is much more than just what you have, the physical the money in the bank or the assets that you have. So we were really feeling that, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to move out into the country. And we chose Canada partly because it was affordable, but also we chose a part of Canada, rural Nova Scotia, where life was a little slower. It was like how things used to be. And neighbors would stop and talk to each other, and it was great. In the beginning, it was really great. We renovated an old house. We were living by the water. We grew our own food, and we had chickens and guinea fowl, and it was lovely. We were really enjoying it, and we felt very revived after our time in the city. And we felt like we had kind of achieved that goal of protecting ourselves or being in a self-sufficient environment, should a crisis happen. And then COVID hit, and we realized we hadn't planned on medical tyranny. We hadn't prepared ourselves for not being able to go to the grocery store if you didn't have a vax passport and things like that. And all the water catchment and the self-generating energy and all of those things, all the food in the cellar isn't going to protect you from a maniacal government. So during the pandemic, we really had to decide what that future might look like, and whether we were actually more vulnerable sitting out there in a rural spot in Canada, or would it be better to return to the US and seek another place, and look for a little bit more kind of freedom. So we've ended up in Texas, and so far so good.
Yeah, that's a big change. I would say there's not a lot of commonality other than water itself between Nova Scotia and most of Texas. Having
Yes.
understand that. Okay, so you come there. Let's expand now into what motivated you to start Collapse Life. What is it about, and what is it you're trying to hope to achieve through it?
Yeah. So Collapse Life is both a blog and a podcast. And it came to us as a way of using our skills to kind of give back, also to create a business of our own. And really to just explore, so we made the move from Nova Scotia to Texas, and we're here still kind of trying to figure it all out. We know huge changes are happening, and we're tapping into other people who are really helping us kind of explore some of those themes, like yourself, and people talking about food sovereignty, people talking about medical freedom. Um, we were having those conversations in our life anyway, and realized there's a lot of people who don't know these things or understand them, and not that we know everything. And that's kind of why the blog and the podcast are a way of helping us to expand our knowledge and to understand those things, but also sharing that along. So we're on Substack, and it's been an amazing platform because just organically we're finding people who are joining on and following the blog, and participating, commenting, and really we've been able to find an audience of like-minded people, and people who, like us through COVID, started to sort of ask some questions and say, I don't know, this doesn't seem right, or the way things used to be don't really feel like they're there anymore. So we call Collapse Life a thinking person's guide to civilization and demise. And some people have reacted saying, "Oh, collapse life, that sounds really gloomy. I don't like that." But it's kind of it's a little bit tongue in cheek. We kind of thought of it as like a glossy lifestyle magazine for a lifestyle that's going away. Like cottage life. It's collapse life. But I think one of the things that is important to understand is that collapse isn't like the movies. It's not like wake up the next day and the Statue of Liberty is underwater and everything is dust around you. I think what we're learning and what we're understanding through talking to some people through Collapse Life, people who live in Brazil and South Africa, it's just this slow devolution. Things just start falling apart, and it happens so slowly that to some people it's even imperceptible, but um, it's it's still collapse. It's just in a different way than we pictured it.
So I wanted to ask you, in your vision over the next whatever period of time, what is the most you hope to, and what could somebody watching this, what would you tell them from what you learned, and why should they come and be part of your collapse life?
Mm-hmm. Um, well, we're learning so much, Peter, but I think what's really important is to just start asking the questions. If you feel like there's something's not quite right, with what we're being told in the mainstream media and the main government narratives, it's worth asking the questions. It's worth opening your mind and your eyes to maybe there's another side to this. And I do think that actually COVID, as hard as it's been for so many people, is an opportunity as well, because I think that a lot of people have started to ask those questions. So once you start asking those questions, then I think it helps to then realize that there are also there are also people who are going to tell you the truth, and there are other people who have got this figured out a little bit sooner. So it's really a message of hope in a way. There are things that you can do. We're not a prepper channel, but we have had a lot of conversations just about how you can kind of prepare. So make sure that, for example, your advice, which is so important, we repeat it all the time. Don't mire yourself in debt as soon as possible. Get yourself to a situation where you're financially free, you're out of debt, you diversify the assets that you have, so it's not all in one place. You don't put it into a main commercial bank where you don't have necessarily the say in how that money is being spent or invested. Gold, things like that on the financial front, but it's the same principle when it comes to your food and your water and your electricity. As much as possible, being able to have backups. So you may be in the power grid, but do you have a way of keeping your freezer running if the power were to go out? Do you have some food stored up so that if you have to go a few days without going to the grocery store, that you've even just thought about those things? The thing that is most important, and one of the things that we've really come to think about and learn more about, is the sense of community. Do you have people around you who are going to be assets to you if things were to change, and especially if they were to change very suddenly? Or are your neighbors actually going to be a danger to you? Are they going to be so vulnerable that they fall apart if there's a crisis? Or are they going to come looking at you and saying, oh, how come you have power and I don't? Maybe I can just, take what you have, or whatever it is. So I think that's been a real awakening. We didn't really think about that even when we were living up in Nova Scotia. We didn't so much think about who you live amongst, and whether those people see the world the way you do. So that's been really important. And I think one of the things through Collapse Life that we're doing is building at least a virtual community. And that's where I think, answering the second part of your question, at least knowing that there's other people out there who are asking these questions, and learning and sharing resources. People are very generous with sharing how they do things, or offering links to books or tools or resources. So even having that virtual community, there's at least a sense of we're in this together. There are other people who see the world in a similar way, and who haven't bought into all the lies. And it just helps to feel like, okay, we'll be okay as long as people still have common sense and still can have a laugh. One of the great things about the comments in Collapse Life and the community that we're building is these are very intelligent, very sensitive people, but they also still, joke around and have a laugh. And So yeah, I mean it's been great, and it's been growing slowly but surely, and we're just so grateful for everyone who watches a podcast or comes by and reads a blog post or shares it with someone else. We're just so grateful for that. It's been amazing.
So I'll put all those links in this video, but I have to ask you before I go, because you told me something real interesting when you last spoke to me. I won't say exactly where you live, but you live close enough to the border that you could walk to the border. And you told me about the people that were on the bridges and on the other side. I'm wondering, A, if that's still the case, and if you could just share that with us.
Yeah, yeah. So where we live, we're about 30 minutes from the border with Mexico. And there is a way to just you drive your car down to the border, stay on the US side, park your car, and you just walk across a bridge and you're in Mexico, and you can go to the supermarket there, go to the pharmacy there. It's just like a lot of people who know California would know Tijuana or Ensenada. It's a lot like that. It's just on a much smaller scale. And so ever since we've moved here, we do that. We go and um, have a lunch and go to the pharmacy and buy things that you can't buy in the pharmacy here over the counter, very legal. And suddenly in December, the thing that changed, which we discussed with you the last time we spoke, is there or the bridge used to just be it's a driving but also a pedestrian bridge, and it used to just be open. You would walk over to Mexico and then walk back, and there was nobody there. And all of a sudden in December, there was a little encampment on the Mexican side of the bridge as you return back to the US, of little tents and sleeping bags and migrants waiting at the border to come across to the US. In early December, when we saw this for the first time, and we've now been here almost 2 years, so this was a very new thing we hadn't seen before. These were people who had obviously come across to Mexico um, in in a comfortable way. They were well clothed. They had little carry-on suitcases with wheels. These are not people who had hiked up through the Darien Gap, I don't think. Um, and in early December, it seemed like most of those people that we saw were from maybe Russia or the Ukraine. It was mostly that. That's what we saw and what we heard in terms of the language they were speaking. Um, Later in December, and then when we went most recently, the encampment is still there, the tents and the people sleeping there, but the type of people has changed. It now seems to be more Latin American people, but it's just it boggles our mind. I don't understand it. I don't know what they're waiting for. I don't know how they got there or who's supporting them to be there. It's sad to see. You don't want to see people, camping out like that, but it's also just it's curious. It's upsetting. It's
Yeah.
just a very strange thing, Peter. It's yeah.
You don't have to tell me you remember my discussion. It's number three of five things. Like it's an invasion, it's an economic invasion as well. And whether or not, and that's what made me so interested, because I've been telling everybody, oh, most of these people just come with their shirts on the back. Is no, Peter, I got to tell you this story. And but like I said, this is just it's going to come back to bite us in a big way, and it's just one of
Mm.
several problems. All right, listen, I feel a little bit better that I could do something for you for a change. I would encourage all my clients and friends and followers that see this video to visit and hopefully sign up, and look forward to one of us speaking as a host and a guest again before too long. How's that?
I appreciate that so much, Peter. And before I go, I just one of the things that I wanted to say that I think has made our conversations so special, and one of the reasons why I would love to invite you back to talk to us again, is just that. Well, I mean, I've always loved your humility in telling your own story, but also just your faith that is so important to you, and just imbues everything you do. And that's been a journey for myself and my husband as well. And you've really been kind of a role model in that, just to bring your faith and your belief in God into everything you do, and to not be ashamed of that. There is absolutely nothing to be embarrassed about, and in fact, you wear it so proudly. And we are trying to do the same, and it's been increasingly important to us, and a place where we really feel strength and faith, and we appreciate that, being on that journey with you and with others. And so, God bless, Peter. Thank you so much.
Praise be to God. Sometimes it is a challenge because, especially in the financial service, because you're only viewed three ways. He's a charlatan. I don't care what he does. If he can make me money, or I'm so glad I found another believer. That's the
Mhm.
only three ways that you're viewed at. But ultimately, and you know this, the only judge that's going to matter, we're all going to stand before that. And that's everything else is not going to matter. So anyway,
Thanks.
listen, give your husband my best. And before too long, we'll be speaking again.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. The team here at Collapse Life is grateful for everyone who takes the time to view our videos or read our stories. You are the reason we keep doing what we're doing. If you have ideas for future guests, or you want to see us dive into certain topics, or if you'd just like to learn more about us and support what we do, you can do that over at our Substack, collapselife.substack.com, or you can find us on Twitter at collapse_life. And in the coming weeks, we'll be making changes to the collapselife.com website, including upgrading our store. We want to extend our deep thanks to Peter Grandich for allowing us to freely share his interview with me. If you want to learn more about him and his background, head on over to petergrandich.com. There's so much to explore there, including free ebooks and a link to his Twitter account, which is not only informative, but also very entertaining. Next week, we'll be back with another great guest, and we look forward to seeing you back here. In the meantime, keep your chin up. It's only Collapse. See you soon.